It was just past midnight on May 22nd, 2025, when the crypto world got hit with a sucker punch. Traders were asleep, markets were calm, and DeFi protocols across chains were functioning as usual. Then, without warning, Sui's core bridge infrastructure was compromised. Within minutes, an exploit funneled out $223 million in tokens, a combination of SUI, USDC, and wrapped assets from bridged networks. The attacker used a sequence of forged validator approvals to mint and withdraw unbacked assets. It wasn't a simple drain. This was a targeted, highly informed attack that exploited the nuances of Sui's bridging and validator logic. But what shocked the world even more wasn't just the exploit. It was what came after. The Sui validators coordinated to freeze the assets mid-flight. In doing so, they halted the theft of over $162 million, marking a moment of both relief and controversy. Was this a heroic defense of the ecosystem, or a terrifying reveal that Sui wasn't as decentralized as everyone thought? This single moment rewrote assumptions about validator control, decentralization, and emergency powers within DeFi ecosystems. The exploit itself wasn't flashy. It was subtle, surgical, and executed by someone who knew the architecture intimately. Instead of finding a smart contract bug, the attacker targeted the cross-chain bridge, one of the most vulnerable components in any DeFi system. These bridges serve as connective tissue between different chains, and Sui's relied on validator-signed messages to confirm transfers. By manipulating the off-chain logic used by validators to approve bridge transactions, the attacker crafted fake approvals that mimicked legitimate cross-chain messages. The bridge software failed to distinguish between genuine and forged messages because of a lack of multi-step authentication on validator signatures. This meant the attacker could trick the system into minting unbacked tokens, essentially creating value out of thin air and withdrawing it before any alarms were raised. The only reason the exploit didn't escalate further was because of the validator's emergency intervention. What this revealed was the fragile trust we place in bridge security and validator integrity. The attacker didn't crack the system. They found a shortcut through its weakest joint. Sui's validator set, normally expected to act as passive infrastructure, took center stage. In a bold move, they froze the funds in motion using privileged commands. This wasn't some automated circuit breaker. It was a manual intervention coordinated through validator chat groups, complete with internal debates, real-time forensics, and protocol overrides. In doing so, Sui became both the hero and the villain. On one hand, the community praised the quick action. It was arguably the only reason the majority of funds were saved. On the other, critics pointed to the horrifying implications. If validators can freeze tokens, what else can they do? Could they one day censor transactions, block users, or even reverse legitimate transfers? This chapter in Sui's history made one thing abundantly clear. Decentralized doesn't always mean immune to control. The validators had acted like gods, and while their actions saved money, they cracked open a philosophical debate that may haunt Sui for years. The validator freeze, while effective, immediately threw Sui into a legal grey zone. By stepping in to halt fund movements, validators arguably took on a custodial role. In traditional finance, this would make them fiduciaries, accountable entities with legal obligations. But in crypto, where decentralization is the shield against regulation, that act could have unintended consequences. What happens if someone innocent, not the attacker, had their tokens frozen? What if the recovery process mistakenly flagged legitimate transfers? Are validators liable for damages? More importantly, could governments now argue that validators are acting as intermediaries, thereby subjecting them to compliance laws, KYC mandates, and taxation frameworks? The line between infrastructure and governance blurred, and regulators were watching. This wasn't just about one hack. This was about redefining what power validators actually hold, and whether they should be regulated like banks, exchanges, or something entirely new. Even after most funds were saved, the ecosystem trembled. Sui's total value locked, or TVL, began hemorrhaging. Users pulled their funds not because they were affected, but because they no longer trusted the chain's neutrality. They realized that if validators could step in during a crisis, they could do it any time, and that what if was enough to drive panic. Developers paused upcoming launches, bridging volume fell, liquidity dried up. Influencers who once hyped Sui went radio silent. This wasn't about money anymore, it was about belief. Trust is the true currency of DeFi, and Sui had burned a chunk of it in exchange for damage control. As the dust settled, the crypto world stood divided. Some saw Sui's actions as proof that DeFi needs emergency brakes. Others saw it as evidence that no system with off switches can ever be called decentralized. But here's the harsh truth. True decentralization is brutal. If you lose your money, there's no one to save you. It's the financial equivalent of survival of the fittest. Sui tried to find a middle ground, decentralization with seatbelts, and in doing so created a hybrid that pleased no one fully. The community was left with a question no white paper can answer. Would you rather lose your money to a hacker or trust a council of humans to stop it, and potentially stop you one day too? The Sui hack wasn't just a security failure, it was a mirror held up to the entire DeFi industry. It showed that bridges are still the most dangerous components in crypto. It reminded us that validators, no matter how decentralized they claim to be, hold immense power. And it exposed how few users truly understand who's in control behind the scenes. More than anything, it highlighted the need for transparency, not just in code, but in governance. If validators can act unilaterally, the community should know exactly when, how, and under what circumstances. Protocols must now wrestle with uncomfortable questions. Should they implement decentralized kill switches governed by DAOs? Should bridge security be outsourced or brought entirely in-house? Should there be on-chain alerts for governance interventions? None of these are easy answers, but Sui's pain may serve as a blueprint for better systems going forward.